We're also talking about the energy crisis in Europe. Sadly, it continues to worsen as winter approaches quickly. Residents are struggling to keep their power on and heat their homes. And then there's the other huge problem they're facing, and that is those rising energy costs.
And now European governments are offering $696 billion in handouts and subsidies for their green energy policies. They're hoping it will alleviate the burdens of the same failed policies. A study by the Huffington Post UK says roughly 25% of Britain will not turn on their heating. This as energy bills in the UK increased by as much as 80% last month. Joining us now for more analysis and insight on this is Nigel Farage, host of Farage on GB News in the UK. Great to have you with us, Nigel.
Hey, Nigel.
Thank you very much indeed. And yes, we have a huge problem over here. It's called net zero, right? It's called committing yourself to no carbon emissions, by 2050. And what it means is you don't mine your own coal, you don't produce your own gas, you don't produce your own oil, you import it, and you have very, very expensive prices. You subsidize wind energy, you subsidize solar by adding to the costs of basic electricity, and that then means your industries can't be competitive, so they head off to India and China and elsewhere. The whole thing is a complete disaster, and it isn't even helping the planet, because last year China built 80 new coal-fired power stations in 1 year, and we only produce 1% of global CO2. It is lunacy, and yet Joe Biden seems to be very attracted by it.
He does. I mean, and we're seeing in the UK, we just mentioned the residents' skyrocketing energy prices. So, of course, Nigel, here in the U.S., we're concerned. We're seeing our inflation go up as high as the UK. And President Biden still went ahead with the Inflation Reduction Act. Why isn't he listening to these warning signs, which seem to just spell disaster for Europe?
Well, the one lucky thing you've got going for you is, of course, that you are energy independent. Now, a few more years of the Democrats and perhaps you won't be. But at the moment, what you're paying for gas, your consumers are paying for gas, is about a third of what they're paying in most of Europe. So count yourselves lucky on that front. Otherwise, inflation in America would be even worse than it is today. But it gets even more serious because for us, it's not just about high prices. We genuinely face the prospect that if we get a very cold winter in the UK and across Northern Europe, literally in February, we could see massive power outages that could go on for day after day, which in a modern, digitized, computerized world would be a complete and utter disaster. Now, slowly but surely, the population are waking up to this. There is increased opposition. Westminster, our mainstream media are very out of touch. Public opinion is shifting and waking up to the fact this stuff is unrealistic. And here's the key. If you go for net zero, you go for green energy, it's unaffordable for ordinary people.
Yeah, and they know that, Nigel. And what do you mean? The mainstream media is out of touch with the average working class person in the UK and the United States? Who would have thought of such a thing? We talked about the energy crisis in Europe. I also want to talk to you about what's going on in the Netherlands with the farming there. The Netherlands is buying and closing 3,000 farms. They say they need to meet EU nature preservation rules. Their goal is cutting nitrogen emissions in half by 2030. I mean, we've seen the protests. Thousands of farmers across Europe are rejecting this, and people see their energy and food prices skyrocketing. What is really behind this effort to shut down these farms?
Well, once again, these are a series of environmental targets, which whilst, in the first instance may be well-intentioned, when it comes to practical implementation are a disaster. What it means is that for the Netherlands, 20 to 25% of its beef and dairy production is going to close. These animals will be slaughtered. They will not be replaced. Goodness knows what's going to happen to the land. And we're being encouraged, basically, to go vegan. Go vegan and save the planet.
You can eat the bugs, too, Nigel. You can always eat the bugs.
So it's like a climate agenda over the food supply crisis we face. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and I'm sure that the World Economic Forum would love us to eat locusts or something like that. But personally, being English, I rather like milk in my tea, and I do enjoy a good burger. And I'm not going to change. But this is the madness. This is the insanity that has overtaken the ruling classes of Europe. Brussels, of course, the European Union being the epicenter of it. Look, I think there's going to be a big voter backlash against this. And I think the previous segment you showed of Giorgia Meloni in Italy, she is not taking these crazy measures.
Right.
And whilst Italian politics has a history of prime ministers not lasting very long, I have a feeling that Meloni is here for keeps. And I think it could be the beginning of quite a big revival of conservative politics right across Europe. At least I do hope so.
Well, she is definitely making an impact. And yes, a full English breakfast would not be the same without the bacon rasher, the blood pudding, and the white pudding, Nigel. So
And keeps the farmers in business,
that's right.
too.
That's right. Great to see you, Nigel. Thanks so much for being with us.